are connecting. We are now recording. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Rob Kalman. I'm one of the organizers of Scrum Detroit. We are the Authorized Scrum Alliance user group, if you will, the Meetup group for Michigan. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about coaching, what it takes to be a coach. And we have a few people we're going to be talking with. Howard Sublett's going to be here. And I'm going to mute whoever is talking so we can keep that down. If you want, you can mute yourself. And if we go for questions, then you can unmute yourself. I was just saying Howard's here. He is the Chief Product Owner for the Scrum Alliance, and he's been gracious enough to join us and talk about the plans for Scrum Alliance and his views in coaching. A couple guys who I'm going to introduce, Gary and Emran, are both coaches from United Health Group in Minneapolis, and they're going to help us a little bit answer questions and talk about their journey to becoming certified team coaches. And Liliana is going to jump in. Liliana is one of the co-organizers of Scrum Detroit with me, and she's actually in the process of becoming a certified team coach herself. And so her perspective will be pretty interesting. She'll be able to ask some questions that maybe some of you haven't thought of. I started writing down some questions to help get the conversations going. And then if you want to ask questions throughout, I'll monitor the chat. You can let me know you want to talk and I'll call you out and you can ask a question when we get to the portion. But I'm going to, and Chet, looks like Chet Hendrickson's joined us, one of our certified Scrum trainers. And so he'll be able to help answer some questions as well. I think Howard is down south right now. So I need to see if Howard, are you?
Howard, so the grand introduction for Howard is he is outside shivering in order to make his entrance for us. Is that right, Howard? Are you ready?
Well, I was going to share with you that one of the benefits of COVID, if there is such a thing as a benefit, is that I get to live in southern Arkansas where it's warm and balmy, where we have palm trees and awesome things. And I didn't have to come actually physically to be in Scrum Detroit, to be in Detroit where it's cold and nasty and like this time of year, like winter travel to Detroit is not one of my favorite things. So like we've got a good, what is it, like 12 inches of snow here, which never happens. So it's 18 balmy degrees. And I thought it might be fun for you to enjoy the fact that I'm outside shivering, thinking about being in Detroit with you all tonight. So it's good to see you all. I see some heads nodding. You're like, yes, it's cold in Detroit right now as well. And I'll do this and then I'll go in and take questions in a little bit. So Rob asked me to talk a little bit about coaching and why I'm passionate about it. And honestly, my whole background has come from working in the industry and helping organizations make this shift. And you all have seen time and time and time again, organizations try an agile transformation and fail, start and stop, where they have made some changes, but yet they don't seem to get it and they move back, right? And I started looking because I came from agile consultancies around the country, helped build Big Visible out of Boston, and then Solutions IQ out of Seattle. Then we were acquired by Accenture, which is a tiny, tiny little consulting company of about 600,000 employees. And I started noticing some patterns where you had organizations that were better at that stickiness of agile transformations and ones that weren't in it. A lot of times it had to do with the quality and caliber of the person I could hire for that particular engagement. So I did a real quick search today, and here's my PowerPoint. Those of you that know me know I do great PowerPoint. Right now on LinkedIn, there are 373,000 people that say that they're an agile coach in this world. Now, LinkedIn really only covers the United States and a little bit of Europe, so that's not really correct. But these are people that have their current title as Agile Coach. How many of them do you think are really good at what that they do? And at the same time, we are still in the middle of an economic crisis. On Indeed today, there are over 8,000 job openings, and many of those job openings are trying to hire 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 coaches right now. The demand, I've got to get out of the snow. I'm shivering. Dang it. The demand is extreme. Like I thought it would be funny. I didn't realize it would actually start. The demand is so high, right? And this is like, if you all ever did mission work, like when Katrina hit New Orleans, like people with great hearts and really wanted to go help drove to New Orleans and tried to build houses. Now, maybe they were an okay builder in Detroit or in Arkansas or somewhere else, but they didn't know the building regulations where they were going. And they built some houses, and some of them probably still aren't standing. The local people that were good at their crafts, that knew what they were doing, knew how to do that. And I think there's such a demand for Agile coaching in the world that everybody and their brother is writing the words Agile coach on their business card. I've got a mission to professionalize the world of Agile coaching, to make it different, to make it something that you just can't put on your business card, to set a bar to where people will measure themselves against that bar, to where we'll know what it really means to be a truly vetted, peer-reviewed professional in the world of Agile coaching. Scrum Alliance owns the marks for Certified Agile Coach, and we have two different certifications in that. It's a Certified Enterprise Coach, somebody that tends to work across organizations, and Certified Team Coaches, ones that work across teams. Now, I want to make sure you know this. This is no 2-day course that you go to, and I think a couple of the other people on are going to try to talk about their journeys. This is a long, difficult, complex process to go through where you get peer reviewed and peer vetted. And I believe you, if you're on this, you're calling yourself an Agile coach, that you want to help your client, you want to make a lasting impact in the world, and you may be good enough. But the question is, have you been peer reviewed and peer vetted? Like, there's something about joining a tribe of people that vet each other to ensure that a quality caliber is high enough so that the world can measure yourself against that. So that's been my mission. I want to professionalize the role of Agile coaching. Scrum Alliance is a nonprofit global organization. Every dollar that we receive comes from work that advances our mission, and every dollar we receive, we spend it on that mission. In the last 5 years, we've given over $15 million for user groups like Detroit, for groups in Peru, for bringing people together, thought leaders together around the world to advance the mission of agility. And I'm planning to use our funds that we have to professionalize the role of Agile coaching. So I'm going to go off camera, Rob, so that I don't make you all sick when I'll go back to my office. And while you can help make a segue for me.
Well, enjoy, because I think we're going to ask Gary and Emran to talk a little bit. Howard's mission to bring coaching and raise the bar, if you will. When I had the idea to do this meetup, because quite frankly, a lot of people call me up, because I think a lot of you know I own a training company, and we help people become certified Scrum Masters and product owners, and we help them with their journey for the advanced courses. People call up and say, how do I become a coach? I really want to be a coach. And I'm like, okay, guys, you need to understand the process, because it's not, like Howard said, a 2-day class. Gary and Emran, Gary Hansen, Emran Bhojawala are with United Health Group, and I'm going to let them talk a little bit about first you guys can introduce themselves, and then you guys can talk a little bit about how you started. And I think you might have a few slides you want to share. You guys have to unmute yourself.
Yes. So we have a couple of slides. We're really going to just show you 2.
Okay.
Unless something else comes up, then the slides are really just, oh, what am I showing? I don't use Zoom every day. We use WebEx, we use Teams, we use a number of things. I think I'm the wrong thing. Are you seeing a picture of me?
No, we are seeing the other screen where I can see the PowerPoint. There we go.
There you go. We got the PowerPoint now.
Yep.
All right. So that's a picture of me, a little nicer than the COVID outfit. Whatever that means, T-shirt. So we just thought it'd be nice to have some slides to look at that explains who we are. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail here. What we really want to do is be able to have conversation. So we're not going to tell you all the things you might ask us. We want to be able to have that discussion. So just to give you a little bit of a background, you can see my education on the far left. I have a master's in human resource development. So you think about HR development, it's organization development, it's organization design, it's change leadership, it's guiding change in an organizational setting. So that's my background primarily from an educational standpoint. In the transformation section, I added my certifications mainly because I couldn't fit them in the other column. And this isn't all of them, but I wanted to be able to show a few of the things that I've done in the past. And not all of these are even important to me, such as the PMP. That's really not of importance to me, other than I just want to show that's part of my journey. So I've been in the shoes of PMs. I think that's one of the things that has helped me in my coaching is I can empathize and I can explain what it's like to be that role and what it looks like to change the vision of how to approach work. So as you see, there's a number of certifications there. The big things to point out, I think, from a coaching perspective is the CTC. And one of the things that I did to help me fill some gaps, and I had a lot of gaps, I still have a lot of gaps. I'm learning every day gaps I have. But one of the gaps I had in the Agile coaching world is that there are a number of different stances you take as an Agile coach. And I focused primarily on training, and I focused on mentoring and kind of consulting. I didn't focus on the aspects of facilitation and coaching, so professional coaching or International Coaching Federation style coaching. And that was a gap I had. So you can see I have an ICF, ACC, an International Coaching Federation's coaching certificate. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is community involvement. And this is a few things, and Emran, I know only put a few things himself. But one of the things that a certified enterprise coach or a certified team coach, the Scrum Alliance, has is a significant history of giving back to the community. And I don't think it's just about giving back. I think that through giving back, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about others, you build a network of people that can be your peers, that can help you learn and grow. So you can see I've been a reviewer of a number of books. I'm helping out build the new Best Agile Articles book for 2020, I guess it would have been. So these are a few things about me, and we'll go more into my past and Emran's past, but let's move to Emran.
Yeah, my background isn't as prolific as Gary's on that front, but so my education has always been, so I've been always curious about the human interaction, how we come together, and that's been something that's always been close to me. And so most of my education has been around that space. Decision support systems is basically looking at logistics and kind of seeing how we all play well together it's a basic MIS degree. And then after that, my focus later in my career became conflict resolution and negotiation. So I was very much into the human behavior aspect of it. I was lucky enough to be a consultant for a long time with Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and a couple of other companies. And through them, I happened to be in an advisory role. And I worked in over 7 industries, 25 different companies. But what that did was that it offered me a breadth of experience just looking at different companies and seeing how they are set up. And I saw some really good examples, some really bad examples. But what it gave me a really good insight into is culture and how much that affects how people actually come together and how simple things of personality conflicts actually compromise big efforts that supposedly everybody was around this vision, but it just kind of disintegrates the moment that comes in. And so from there, as I was growing through that, my transformation work started really late in my career because I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know that people were paid to think about process or that people were thinking about creating efficiencies. I just thought that was a fancy way of saying I do some sort of work. So I was at Be The Match and then United Health Group. United Health Group being the type of company it is, I've had over 6 different verticals that we have gone through multiple transformations over there with organizations ranging from about 50 people organizations, very small, just a small startup, kind of like vetting them out, to all the way to organizations that span 4,000 to 5,000 people at that time. But that's been my transformation journey in that space. I have put a couple of my certifications in there. My focus has mostly been around product and kind of bringing teams together and seeing how they interact with each other. I think one of the biggest gaps that I had was kind of what Gary talked about as well, is that understanding the stances. I was always ready with a solution, but having folks understand that insight themselves and arrive there on their own, rather than me telling them, this is the gap that you have. Why wouldn't you solve this? Have you thought about this? And giving them that answer didn't quite work. And so that was the gap that I had to recognize, that there is a very distinct line between consulting and coaching. And how do you switch that? And then giving back to the community was one of the things. My mentor is Robert Widener, who is a CEC, and if you guys have ever heard his name, but he was extremely kind in helping me see that. In fact, in my first role, he was the one who kind of pushed me into that role. I didn't even know I was a Scrum Master for the team until I walked in that day. And so he kind of helped me realize what that actually means in terms of true coaching. And so because he did that for me, I wanted to give back to the community. So I work with a bunch of people who are hopefuls for CTC and growing on that front. And we formed the Agile Twin Cities together, and I was a former board member serving on that front as well. And then we have done some talks at the local events like Scrum Day or some things with Dev Jam. I don't know if you guys have heard about those guys, Dave Hussman and crew as well. I think one of the biggest things that helped me for my CTC was recognizing what is my pull of getting to CTC, because like Howard said, like for me, my journey was about 2.5 years, just from the intent of trying to get there to actually getting there. And a lot of times during that time, I kept asking, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? Is this even worth it? Or is it just going to be just yet another thing? And I think that was the biggest thing that kept me going, is figuring out what your pull is. And for me, it was, I wanted to be on those, there's a guides forum. I wanted to be in those forums and to hear from all the people, or the who's who, and kind of see the nature of conversation that's happening in that space. And counting myself in that group was sort of a validation, and also a bit of a, I don't know, it was something that I wanted to yearn towards. It was a pull for me.
I love that you said it's a journey. I think that people talk, I mean, actually stop the slide share. I want to be able to see everyone. And slideshow. Stop sharing.
You're really good at this.
I'm a professional, I do this stuff every day online, teaching courses and so on, yet you put me in a different tool and I'm completely lost. So I think I stopped it.
No, but it's okay.
No, that's okay.
All right, I stopped it now.
Yeah, you got
Yes,
it.
Now I can see
Good
everyone.
work.
Much
Yes.
better.
So I was saying that it's a journey. You said it took you about 2.5 years to get from when you started going down the path and then getting there. And, I told somebody that it took me about the same amount of time. And they said, it takes 2 years to become a certified team coach. They were under the impression that you could start from being a Scrum Master and get to a certified team coach within that time, because there are other competing certifications that you can go to a certificate. Probably shouldn't pitch other companies, but you can go to another company and have a 2-day class and become a certified Agile coach, or a different title. There's a number of things like that. You can be the highest level in another framework within a 5-day class. So they heard that it took me more than 2 years, and they thought, why? And it's a good question. Why did it take so long? I was a Scrum Master. I started being a Scrum Master in 2008, and I started doing what I thought was coaching in a higher scale relatively quickly. And I think it was 3 years ago, a CST friend of mine said, Gary, you're one of the few people I know that should apply for the CTC. And she thought it was a application I'd fill out and I'd get it done immediately and I'd be flying past. Yet she didn't know anyone else that had passed it yet. So I filled out my application, and it took me a lot of time. I think it's a 20 or 25 page document you produce as the first part of the application process. Since then, we've changed the process a bit. We can talk a bit about what that is. But I filled out the application, I submitted it, and it took several months. It's changed now. The feedback's faster. It took 4 months or so for me to get feedback, and I failed. And I thought, what's wrong with the Scrum Alliance? They don't know what they're talking about. They should definitely just know I'm the thing. I mean, like my CST friend said that this is a piece of cake. You got this. And I spent maybe couple weeks sulking and upset and kind of mad and angry at the Scrum Alliance. And there's some stuff I did that I'm not quite proud of. But then, you know, that community is so strong. Sheree Silas reached out to me. She was one of my reviewers. She spent a couple of hours with me. She wrote a 2 or 3 page document telling me all of the things she saw as gaps. And she met with me periodically over that time for free. There wasn't anything she's charging. She's just a member of the community that wanted to help me. So I was put on a 1-year waiting period, and she had actionable items that I could address and close. And I thought that was just amazing. So after about 1.5 years, I resubmitted the application, got feedback back, and I failed again. So failure is usually your first attempt at learning. That was my second attempt at learning, but I got further in the process because, you know, there's now a first step, which is a discussion to see whether you should proceed. There's the application process. I filled the application. Then there's a secondary part of the application you add on to. So this time I got all the way to the last step, and they said on points they thought I was there, but there was a feeling that I didn't hold the mind of a coach. I didn't have that coaching presence throughout all of my engagements and the way I worked. So that was a challenge, and I had to go back and address it and fill that gap. But it's a journey. And, you know, I read these things. I'm kind of verbose, by the way. I read all these comments from other CTCs and SACs before I applied saying, oh, the journey is life-changing. And I thought, oh, this is all nonsense. This is just marketing. They're trying to show how great they are. I got to the point where I actually kind of had a bit of a breakdown because I thought I was great. I thought it was just incredible. And then when I saw all of the things that I had as gaps, it was overwhelming. But I had Sheree there help me take step after step. And I think that I still don't think I'm great, but I'm recovering. I'm getting better from where I was. But I think it's really important for anyone to find a mentor, mentors. But for me, I had Robert Widener, as Emran mentioned, and I had Sheree Silas helping. So I think that's something that Emran said, we're available. We're happy to help anyone that wants to go down that path.
And I think, so for me as well, in addition to Rob, I had Mary Verstrady, who Mary and Sherry talk as well. And Mary was very kind. So the first time I went through it, and I went through an interview, I was lucky enough through Rob, when I had started the application, I did those 25 pages, writing out all the details. And I'll tell you this, as I was going through that application, I kept thinking, you know, for an organization that kind of advertises that we are reducing waste, we have a lot going on here. And I was so angry typing out that application, because I was like, I don't know what I learned from this one instance of, I don't know what you want me to tell you. And I learned from Rob is that you need to just be about the story. It's not supposed to be this fancy, like walk in the park kind of story. As in, oh, I came, I saw, and I conquered. It needs to talk about the struggles that you are facing, or you faced, or you failed as you were going through it. And I think that was interesting for me to hear. And I also went into this whole long explanation about, oh, they need to understand the context about why I had this challenge. And then they limit you on the number of words. And so you're like, okay, so what do you want me to tell you? But I think as I did that application, after that, Rob also recommended me through a fast track kind of a beta application process that had started. And I thought, okay, I'm totally in. I mean, Rob has recommended me as a CEC, I'm golden. And then they get me in front of this panel. And I did not have any coaching training at that time. And I think the first time I went through this interview, I was like, oh, this is just like anything else. We'll just go through the interview. It'll be smooth sailing. I've coached multiple teams. I know this. And I had my interview, and I failed. And they told me exactly why. Actually, I was told I will get more detailed feedback after the thing. And all I got was one sentence back, which is basically, you were too focused on solving the problem and not about the person. And I was like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. I don't know what to translate that to.
It's hard to see it when you don't have that paradigm.
Right.
It's hard to even interpret the data they present because you're just not there. Like, at least I wasn't.
I didn't know how to comprehend that. So I went to Rob and I talked about it, and he's like, well, yeah, you know, when you're in the coaching stance, you're talking about the person, you're talking about the values, you're talking about why they feel a certain way. I was like, yeah, but how do you do that? They came to you with a problem. They want you to solve the problem. Why would you not do it? And so I had to have this, I called it my high volume, low productivity discussion where Rob kind of calmed me down a little bit as well. And then I invested in ICF ACC coaching. That's where I met Mary. And she was able to help me understand that here are the stances, here's how you switch within them. And while it might seem obvious, it was hard to figure out your own nuances because you don't really see yourself with that much scrutiny until later. So that helped me. And then it took me a year after that to kind of apply and then get ready for the interview. And Gary, actually, I practiced some coaching with Gary, and Gary was also kind enough to introduce me to another friend who was seeking some coaching that I could practice with.
I think an important aspect
yeah.
that you mentioned through Mary is we both went through the same training. And I'm sorry, I'll get to the point quick.
All right.
One of the things I thought was valuable is Mary actually was a mentor coach. So she would observe you coaching, or she would listen to a recording of you coaching. So you can hear back what you're doing and think about, she'll ask, what brought you to that question? How did you determine to go here? So it's helping you be very mindful and cognizant about what you're doing and how you're trying to head. I think that's very important, is to have that mentor that can be there with you. And someone had a question or comment?
Right. I was going to say, Howard has been shaking his head, smiling, and I don't know if Howard, you want to add something to what they've said?
It's in all honesty, I usually get most of those complaints in writing that the Scrum Alliance isn't fair and why do they not think I'm all of that and a bag of chips? It was just really fun to hear somebody in real time, because that's a pattern that happens when people coach on their own and they're working in an engagement and they believe that they are doing the right thing and they believe that they have all of the senses. And when the first feedback comes back and they're miles away, the first reaction typically is to blame the organization, when you both know that the people that are there helping to vet everybody are desperately trying to help people achieve this goal. I mean, they're there as your advocate. They're there to try to help you get to that area, but they also have to hold that line and be honest. So it's just fun to hear some of that real time.
Well,
There is also one thing, as you were saying, that that kind of came to mind, is one of my biggest realizations was in a lot of the organizations, when you're hired as an Agile coach, most of the time it's not actually a coaching engagement. It does not translate into that relationship. That idea of people actually opting into a coaching relationship happens very, very seldom, especially in those roles. They are Agile coaches, but they're under the guise of a consultant, somebody who already has the answers, that's going in and saying, I'm going to do this to you, as opposed to somebody actually showing up for coaching. And that has been one of the realizations, and that's changed how I've approached engagements. And it's quite interesting to know.
I guess I'm going to ask a couple questions, maybe help you guys moving along a little bit. Somebody, if you guys in the audience have questions, please use chat, and then we'll try and get them in there and let Liliana jump in as well. Somebody asked how you find a mentor, and I think also, I guess there's one question, one part of the application where they say you have to have a certain number of hours of coaching before you can apply to be a coach. And if you're a Scrum Master and you're not in an organization as a coach, how do you guys, what do you think about, I guess, what kind of answer would you give somebody when they say, well, how do I get coaching experience if I'm a Scrum Master or a product owner, but I'm not a coach and my organization doesn't value coaching, but I don't want to quit my job. You know, you're sort of in this little, you're in a state of imbalance in a way. How do you answer something like that? And where can you get a mentor, and how can you get some coaching experience to help fill out that application?
It's very similar to people that want to be a Scrum Master. Maybe they've taken a training, but no one will hire them yet because they don't have the experience. Most of the time I find people that if they don't have a job that's going to hire them as a coach, and they can't do that, the skills of Agile coaching are things that you can learn about online. I think we have, and I'll see if I can find a link and post it in the chat. I forget how many it is, 40 or 50 or 60 online e-learning videos that are free. So I'm not trying to sell you anything, but it'll just help give you a frame of mind of what are the aspects of a coach. But I challenge you to find the thing that you're passionate about. Like there is something in your life that you spend your free time doing. Maybe it's Girl Scouts, or maybe it's Habitat for Humanity, or maybe it's the local Humane Society, something you volunteer your hours with that is an organization that could use the skill sets that we Agilists, all of us that are on this call, are a unique breed. We have this weird view of the world that organizations may not have to be pyramids. They may be flat, or they may be upside down pyramids, or that there's a better, more humane way to work than a top-down assistant vice president of supervision passing orders down to somebody else. We have a different way of thinking about work, team-based work. So you can apply your skill set and your passion to learn and journal. Like how many houses is Habitat building in your area? What are the problems that they're facing? What are the problems that the leader there is facing? How can you help them overcome those things? Start measuring it and start experimenting and learning. There are many people that actually go on a journey to become a coach or become a scrum master without actually having a full-time job as that. They find ways to use their passion. I say Habitat for Humanity. My wife's in the other room. She's finance manager for Habitat for Humanity. And they have a giant scrum board on the wall right now as they're trying to visualize their work. So,
Hey, you know what, Howard? What's funny is I worked for a company called Thrivent Financial, and they had a Thrivent and Habitat had a partnership. And it may have been me that introduced Scrum to them.
Very
Small
cool.
world.
And yeah, I was just going to pipe in and just on that whole idea and aspect of community, as we are working through these things. For example, I peer up with partners within my community and peers to say, hey, do you need a peer coach? Do you need a peer mentor? Or can you peer coach me or peer mentor me? Because in the application process, you also need to be a part of the community. And this is a way to do outreach and be involved in the work you're doing, but help give back to others, but it helps grow yourself as well.
Right.
So-
Liliana, let me interrupt for a second. You went to a Scrum Alliance coaching retreat, which I don't know if people realize those exist. So
Yeah.
maybe you can tell everybody a little bit about that, and Howard, you can jump in too.
Yeah, so before COVID 2020, I had the opportunity to attend the Scrum Alliance Coaches Retreat in Hamburg, Germany. And again, that sense of community. And I really want to encourage and remind everyone Scrum Alliance really helps build that. I was able to meet people from different countries. And in doing that, I was able to see how different coaches also think and approach things. So it really helped me open up my coaching perspective and my coaching mindset with different tools and approaches. But it was one of the best experiences, sorry, Howard, but that I've had ever at a Scrum Alliance, either, what can I say? Meeting or conference, anything like that. So
well, the coaching retreats are wonderful things. They're very small, they're very intimate, they're designed that way. But now COVID has hit, and we did run our very first ever Agile coaching retreat online. It was completely free. Like I said, if we charge things for things, we're just trying to offset the cost of them, right? They're not money-making ventures for us. But the Agile coaching retreat online that we had earlier this year, not in 2021, it was in 2020. I think we had 8,500 people from around the world. We ran it in 4 time zones, 3 different languages. Anyway, it was really an amazing experience for people to get into pair coaching sessions and to learn from each other. We had different people teaching things, but mostly the whole event was about making connections around the world. And I know we've got at least 2 or 3 more of those coming in 2021. And we will have a section of the Agile conference in July where we're running a coaching retreat as well on that one. So there'll be many other online opportunities to do this.
and as an alumni, I highly recommend it on part of your path or journey to become a certified enterprise or team coach.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit jealous that was created after the fact, that after I got my CTC, and even the path to coaching videos. I reviewed them after I had a CTC, and when I started watching the videos, I thought, wow, that's how they're trying to get at that question. That's the language they're trying to use. So I think those are two great places to go. The other thing I think I'd say to get experience, there's a ton of things you can do. We've mentioned building the community. Emran's available. I'm available. Robert Widener, we mentioned a few times. Robert was a mentor of mine 3 years before I worked for him. Another person, Bill Ash, is somebody that Emran and I know. None of these people are just giving. They just want to help. And you'd be surprised by even reaching out to some of the founders of the Agile movement. People are willing to give time for those that want to learn. It's not always about making money. If you're working with people that excite you, that's exciting. But taking a step back, how do you get experience as a Scrum Master or a coach? I think people often think that they have to be working in an Agile environment or a Scrum environment to get experience as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach. And the reality is, these approaches are trying to address common challenges that are in any environment. So that's where we're talking about, like the Girl Scouts or whatever it might be. There's common challenges in any environment. So it's looking at what is the constraint, what is the challenge, and then how can you help people come together to look at that challenge and move forward. So even if you're working in a traditional waterfall environment, there's concepts you can look at and start to help get experience, get those stories about what your skills are, so you can get the job that you want. So it's not always needing to get the job first, it's put the work in to get the job.
Right. Emran, you look, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was trying to say that I had to do some of that work on my own as well, in terms of trying to find the experience that's necessary. And Gary, I was going to make that same point. You don't actually have to be in the job to do that. So I did a couple of things. One was to do whatever role you're in, whether you're, I saw a question about how do I get that kind of experience as a release trained engineer. As a release trained engineer or a Scrum Master, or even as an analyst, whoever you are, whatever role you're playing, there is a circle of influence that you build based on the quality of your work, right? And if you are in that position and you are employed in that space, I promise you, there is someone looking at your work, looking at the way that you are handling your career and saying, you know what, that would be something that I would want to emulate. That would be something that I could pick from or learn from. And these are people typically that you normally find a rhythm with. You're talking to them, you guys interact well with each other, you guys learn with each other, and there is probably this, there's no longer this ego in between wherein you are able to lean in and you're able to say, oh yeah, you know what, that's a good point. I never thought about that. Resonate with those people, start advertising that intent with them, and you'll find that some of them will probably say, hey, you know what, I'd love to enter into a coaching relationship with you and go back and forth and run ideas off of each other. Some of my closest friends because we started that relationship at work and we started having these deep conversations. The other thing you can start doing is that as you're reading up on concepts and ideas or from these books, start implementing them. Nobody has to know that you're doing this. And in that, you could try and experiment. Today, when I meet with Howard, I'm going to talk about this particular concept and see if I can switch the ball for him to realize an insight that I want him to realize. I'm not going to give him this answer. I'm not going to say these things in this manner. And challenge yourself in that manner. And that kind of made it a game for me. And it also, it kind of helped me ask the right questions to get them there. Those are good ways. And then, of course, the community is one way. Add into your local meetup. I was very afraid of reaching out to the celebrities of the Agile world, if you call them, like a Derby or Mary Poppendike or any of these guys. That's how I saw it. And I was like, I am nobody. Why would they invest time or even waste time talking to this guy who wants to be a CTO? Why would they? And I was very gun shy on that front. So I wanted to find local people that I could work with and I could start asking them questions. And I met Mary Poppendike through there. I met Esther Derby through there, and they were very kind in terms of helping me out on that front. But it's okay to take baby steps and find peers that you can work with, or not peers or whatever. You don't have to be in that job or be called a coach.
And Emran, just to kind of follow up with what you said, we don't know what we don't know until we try it. And that whole coaching mindset of we need to step into that uncomfortable zone of unknown community. Hey, Scrum Detroit, Scrum Alliance user group, by the way, you could always put a comment looking for a coach, looking for a mentor. Why not put something up on your LinkedIn page? You really have nothing to lose because it's a learning experience and someone will probably be able to help you. So don't be afraid to try it.
Yeah, LinkedIn's actually quite amazing in that way. In order to become an ACC through the ICF, you have to have so many, I think it's over 100 hours of coaching experience, I forget, with a certain number of clients. And I've had a number of friends that just go on LinkedIn and say, hey, looking for somebody to coach. Anybody out there? And you don't believe the amount of people that jump on it, because who wouldn't want a free coach?
Yeah, we have a couple questions coming up on the chat as well. I've got a list of questions, but it's the conversation has sort of flowed. So I've sort of let it go in the direction it's going in. I'm curious if anybody wants to ask a question, don't be bashful. Just sort of like say, I want to ask a question on chat and I'll call you out so we can have you unmute yourself. Have you guys noticed a difference between internal coaching, external coaching, and is there a differentiator, I guess, in the application process? We really haven't talked about the full length of the application.
And before we jump into that, Rob, let me just answer this last question that came in. It shouldn't take too long.
Okay.
About this, what if there's a time constraint to the coaching tenure, and if you don't have time to make them realize, or they're just not smart enough? So two things on that. There is always a time constraint on coaching tenures. Whether you go in with an organization or whatever, there's always, like, you have until this time. I have put time constraints on myself to say most of the things that you want to communicate don't need that many words. And I tend to ramble. I don't know if you got that from this conversation, but I tend to ramble. So I put constraints on myself saying that, oh, this is going to be a half-an-hour conversation. And it forced me to kind of switch into the coaching role a lot quicker. And start asking the right questions that are pertinent to it, because half an hour can go like this in just small talk. The other part is I have always maintained there is no such person that is just not smart enough for a coaching conversation. The fact that they're seeking coaching, that they have stepped into that role asking to learn, I have found it a detriment to myself to think that they don't have the mental capacity for it. But instead I've asked, what is the question that I am not asking that will allow them to switch their mindset, to have that aha moment? And it might be as simple as drawing a box on a board, but am I willing to do that? Am I willing to dive in that deep and ask that question? So the problem always laid with me. And if I wasn't able to do it, I just knew that I might not have the right key for this lock within this person, but I can probably refer them to somebody else who can probably help them down that path. Because my coaching style may not resonate, and that's totally okay. And it's also a learning opportunity for me.
Yeah, that's good. And Chet wants to ask a question. So before we get to the external, external coaching, Chet, do you want to ask?
I do. As somebody who's been around this world since the beginning of time, one of the things I often see are folks who are coaches, for maybe even recognized through some way, but I found that they fall into a category that I'm more likened to cheerleader. If you think about a cheerleader, they can stand on the sideline and say all kinds of interesting things, and it mostly doesn't matter what game is being played. Whereas a coach has to kind of understand the game. And one of the things I've run across on more than one occasion is our coaches who don't understand enough about the game that's being played. And so, yes, they're really good at drawing people into some direction, but that isn't the direction that's appropriate given the game. And so what kind of things should we be doing? What kind of things have you folks done to ensure that you understand the game well enough to know what direction we should be going in? Let me give you an example of what I mean. My partner in crime, Ron, was working with some folks a while back, and they had a coach who was a well-known person in the coaching community. And the issue going on was rather technical in nature. The problem that this team were having was that they weren't very good at doing the actual work. And the coach involved was really surprised that you had to actually do things differently in an iterative Agile Scrum world than folks were used to doing in an old-fashioned waterfall kind of world. The work is actually different. And if we don't understand the nature of the work itself, then it's hard to understand that the world is different here than it is over there. And so I found that to be a great challenge with a lot of coaches, is they fall farther on the direction of cheerleading. It doesn't matter whether the game is basketball or football or lacrosse, you go, yay team. Whereas in fact, those games are much, much different.
Agreed.
Very much so, Chet.
That might've been a question, I'm not sure.
I don't think that was a question. That was a pontification, but it was a beautiful one. A beautiful one.
I think that, to add on to it, I think that an Agile coach needs to be well-rounded in a variety of things. They need to understand aspects of the business or be able to learn aspects of the business. How can you coach and mentor and guide a product owner if you don't understand the concepts of product? So I think there's a variety of things that an Agile coach needs to be able to do. And they also need to be able to identify what they don't know and where they have gaps. So I think that you're spot on. They need to understand how the game is played. They need to also have the understanding that, everyone says every company is different. They are always different. So they also need to come to sometimes they need to come with some sort of a beginner's mind, a level of humility in working with teams, because they all have different challenges. They all have different environments. And many coaches I've seen just come in and say, we're going to do Scrum. This is how you do Scrum. And it isn't even a fundamental understanding of Scrum. It's a two-day understanding of what it is. So you need to have humility in the engineering practices and the product practices, in the way that you scale or descale organizations. There's a whole bunch you need to start with from a perspective of interest and wanting to learn, and not just cheerleading or telling.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I think there are two parts to that, though. One is I've seen a lot of coaches who are so well versed with Agile, and they're like, oh, you know what, this framework, this is exactly how it works. It was in this guide on this particular date. This is the word they used, and I get that. But when the knowledge ends there, I think sometimes they don't bring in the domain knowledge that's needed to be able to not only earn the respect of the people that you're working with, but also to empathize in the right way and solve the right problem at that time. Because you could go in and it could be chaos. Oh, guys, you guys really screwed up good. You guys need to stop everything, and we are going to revamp, and we are going to follow this framework, read this framework, go to a couple of trainings. And that, to me, talks about, like, when I see that happen with coaching, I say, okay, this is somebody who has maybe not actually been the coach. Because I think part of it is going in there not with a solution in mind, but being willing to listen, because they made the decisions based on the information they had, asking the right questions, stopping the bleeding at the right time so that they can step back and actually invest in the learning that's needed. And then as a coach, you more often than not don't also have the authority that's needed to be able to say, you're going to do this at this time, right? You're working off of a circle of influence. And so part of the game is also, I'm going to just use this word, not to pussyfoot around the conversation that you need to have, and actually lean in. And when you lean into that conversation, it can't be an abrasive conversation. It has to be a conversation that invites an opt-in kind of approach, wherein they want to see. And then over there, the conversation should be so artful that you're trying to figure out, here's the step that I want them to take. What is the step that they're going to opt in to actually take? And then walk them from that path. And that requires a little bit of stumbling. That requires a bit of a gamble on your part to put yourself out there and say, and maybe have those harder, crucial conversations with the team and make them aware without discouraging them about where they're headed and what the vision actually could be. And then once they see that you're solving the problems with them, for them, at that time, the switch happens. Then they see you walking with them as opposed to walking towards them or showing them the path. At least that's been my experience.
Howard, did you want to add on to this? Or
No, I'm just thinking that if you think that this role of an Agile coach is about frameworks, you're wrong. If you think it's about installing things, you're wrong. I mean, what we're really trying to achieve here in this Agile movement is supremely human. Like we're helping teams of people thrive at work, to bring joyful, prosperous, sustainable workplaces. It is humanity in the workplace. And when you really kind of get that depth of the nuance of what we're trying to do, you can measure your effects of working in an organization, not from how well that they comply with a framework, but from joy in a workplace, from real working product out to the customer every single sprint, and happy customers. Like when it works well, and when it's been guided well, and when people understand what they're really there for, it can be a beautiful thing. But that transition from where they begin to that part is miserably difficult. It is long and it is fraught with peril. And that's one of the reasons why we do call our coaches and our trainers our guides. Because if I'm ever going to climb Mount Everest, I'm going to get somebody that's been there before and somebody that's been vetted. So that's actually the role that I believe we Agilists are here to do, is to bring that humanity to the workplace.
Ooh, and one more thing, Chet, to your question of how you navigated the understanding the game. If you are on this path of becoming a coach, this is one of my things that I had to do. Pay attention to the challenges that you're observing. Pay attention to your aha moments now, and write the stories that are behind it that led you to it. Write them down. This is a very, very crucial exercise. It was a huge boon for me when I actually did that exercise. It took me quite a few hours to do that. But write down those stories now, because what will happen is, and I've fallen in this trap before, is that I've got it. I've done it before. How do you not understand this? I'm showing you this. Just walk with me and I'll get you there. And that understanding how you yourself step to it to get to that aha is hugely, hugely beneficial. So pay close attention to how your aha moments are coming through.
One of the great stories that Ron Jeffries tells is having brought in Ward Cunningham to help on a project. And Ward Cunningham, I believe, is the world's greatest Agile coach. And Ron was trying to write some piece of code. And Ward sat down with him and he said, well, you know how to do blah. And Ron said, yeah. And he's, and it was, so Ron started writing this code and Ward asked something else. And Ron did something, and on and on and on, until Ward finally realized that Ron didn't know how to do this. And Ward took the keyboard and typed one word into the browser, and Ron knew how to solve that problem. Now, that kind of went through all of the coaching stances in a 10-minute slide from, because I believe that a coach's job is to cause the coachee to believe they had the answer inside them all the time, even when they don't. And then finally, at the very end, you have to give them the answer if they really just don't have that in them. And it turns out there was one word that Ward could type on the type, and Ron then knew the answer. And so it's kind of that path of leading someone down the road. And I actually have seen Ward do this. I was sitting with him one day when he was coaching a high school student who was an intern at the company I was working with, to debug an Apache web server. And the kid had never seen any of this before. And at the end, the kid had made every decision about what they were going to do. And they got to the right answer. And Ward never touched the keyboard and never told him what to do. And he just led them down the path. And if I could do that, I'd be a coach instead of a trainer, because I want to give you the answer. And I know that that's what a trainer does. I do very little coach anymore because I want to give you the answer, not do the other thing. And that's just me. That's my personality. So.
Right. So hopefully that was a good long-winded answer for everybody, for you guys in the audience. I know we're coming up on top of the hour. We have some time. I mean, we're in no rush. I know there's a few of you who've asked about this, becoming the coach. So don't be bashful. If you have a couple questions, I think they'll stick around for a few more minutes. If anybody has anything they definitely want to ask.
I do, because I've been on this journey for the past 3 years, and I have in Minneapolis for the Scrum Alliance conference, I met with Cherie to go through my application. So almost normalizing where failure is okay because it's a learning experience. She said, no, you're not ready. And just like you, Gary, she gave me that list of things I needed to do and come back with. But my question would be, what is that coaching interview like? When you have to sit there and do that coaching interview to see what your stance is and all that stuff, what can you tell us, or is that cheating? What can we expect from that? Or Emran or Gary?
I'm looking to Emran because one of the part of the process is if you have an ICF certification, you don't need to do that coach interview. So my experience would be second or third hand. So if you have that certification, part of an ICF certification, you actually have to have a transcript of a coaching session. They have to listen to a coaching session, and you have to pass an exam. And there's actually something like $100 or $200 of training and other things you have to have. So that I think so I'm not representing the Scrum Alliance in this. I think they accept that because it's such a high bar that you don't need to do that next step. So Emran, what was it like? I know you went through it twice.
It was. I'm a very nervous person normally, so I was kind of shaking the second time around because I knew what it was. The first time around, I had no idea what it was. I actually got on the interview, and I actually thought it was an interview, and it was Elise Shapiro actually who was the one who was reviewing me, and she got on there and it's like, okay, you ready to coach me? And I'm like, what do you mean coach you? And that was the first time that she explained to me that this is going to be an actual coaching session. And mind you, at that time, like I mentioned earlier, I'd never actually been in a coaching session, didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the stances and stuff like that, but I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. The interview, the way that the session goes is just like you would with any person you actually have a coaching relationship with. So it's kind of awkward in the sense it's kind of like a role play kind of thing. So you start off, you go in and there's a little bit of small talk. You know that this person is on the panel to review your competency. But then I think what helped me the most was to make that mental switch in my mind that no, I'm going to talk to somebody who's just like another coachee that I'm working with. And then they start, okay, here's now I'm going to do the break. We are going to get into this stance. And then they'll tell you a scenario. And at that moment on, you play the role of a coach and you get about 15, 20 minutes, depending on whoever you're working with, depending on the scenario, how much ever they want to do. And then, in fact, for me, I asked her, how long would this conversation go? And so we landed on 20 minutes together. And then at the end of 20 minutes, I knew that was my window. I knew which coaching stance I was going to go through, the kind of like the model that I wanted to follow, that I was most comfortable with. And then I walked her through it. And then keeping that in mind, I ended it with that thought in place. So you're the one who has to take ownership of that conversation, helping them kind of navigate through there, making sure you're getting the right outcomes within that time constraint. That is actually one of your skills as a coach. And then once that ends, then there is room for her to sometimes offer the feedback. And because I was so very nervous, she was like, you're fine, it's okay. She kind of let the cat out of the bag at the end of it. But
I think it's important to underscore something you said. We need to have a framework, a frame of reference for how we're going to coach. So there's hundreds of models out there. ACT is one. We use T-Grow and 2-Grow as a variation based on whether it's a big coaching discussion for like a 3 or 4 month goal or a shorter term, every week or every couple of day goal. So having a model in your mind of how you're going to follow the coaching arc is important, I think, to know that arc, and also know that the arc isn't going to be linear. So we often think that we're going to go just straight through the path, but a lot of coaching goes backwards, back to the goal. So it's not just GROW for a grow model where you get to the end and there's an action and a way forward and what they're going to do. You need to be comfortable with going backwards and clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a question from Rob. I'm calling you out, but sorry. You mentioned about a company tour wherein you go in and learn about the company and somehow realize that the top of the organization does not understand the bottom level of the organization. Rob, are you on the call? Is it okay? Could we talk about that? Oh, there you are. Would you mind adding a little bit more to that? So is the question, are you saying that you have to do a company tour before you pick up a coaching gig? I was not quite sure.
Well, my understanding of Agile, I got it from my dad. He ran a stamping company, and basically he trusted the staff to do their jobs, and it was a small company, but it was a tier 1 manufacturer of stamping parts. And it seems I was working at a large utility, and there was very little understanding, even at the director level, of what was actually going on at the bottom. And there was a revolution actually happened and removed the director, because the bottom got so ticked at what the director was doing that they removed him in public. And so I have a strong belief in this, within organizations, and we're being stomped on by the Chinese. What are the Chinese doing that is so great that they're exporting all of our products to us, so and taking over our industry? So basically, I was working in that organization. I looked at it and I said, well, it's crazy, because all these guys in the bottom are functioning, and there are many, many different sub-centers and different offices around the metropolitan area and across the state, and they were all they all had opinions on that level. And the guys up at the top had no idea. And it just seemed to be a standard thing within large organizations that the amount of information at the top, even though they may understand how to finance the corporation, they may know how to do the big things. And I've sat in those areas, how to do the big things with the corporation. They don't understand how the everyday happens, and what they could do to facilitate the everyday.
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps. So one of the things that I've learned, and Rob Widener was the one who helped me realize this, is that if you are in any role that comes close to the role of a coach, even if you are not called a coach, and you're kind of playing that role, you might find it a little thankless, in the sense that, oh, I'm trying to make this change happen, but somehow I get close to that change and somehow it falls through. Especially when you're working in larger organizations and you're trying to affect change that goes from the bottom up, or you have an executive year and you're trying to bring in some of the top-down changes that you need as well. Because for any agile transformation to be successful, there is a little bit of bottom-up momentum, but then there is a little bit of a handshake that happens from the top down as well, wherein they come together, and that's when you can create that lasting change, where you have that people change happen, right? So as a coach, I used to feel like this is useless, I'm not making any progress. And one of the things that my mentor helped me realize is that, and he does this so well, is that as you are coaching, what you're trying to do is plant the seeds. And you're successful in every conversation that a person picks up and their mindset changes just a little bit. And that's your measure of success, one conversation at a time. And as you do that, you will find over time, when you stay in there, that people will start repeating your words back to you without realizing that those were the seeds that you planted to begin with. And I've seen him do that multiple times. And that's been a huge lesson for me. It also allowed me to lean into my role as a coach and actually gain fulfillment from that role as well. And so when you're trying to affect that change, I have not seen an organization up till now that I don't see or rather in a large organization, that I haven't seen that disconnect between what the top feels that the bottom knows, or whatever you might have, right? And the executives are like, you don't have the full picture yet. And so you have to kind of have the conversation one at a time, and then try to match that gap, and get it closer together. And if you're lucky enough to have a tenure to see that change translate through, so be it.
Well, I sent that director the information on Agile and management and all of that kind of stuff to try to help him out. And he didn't listen, and he was eliminated, and someone came in that had a better concept of how to manage correctly.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens too.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Guys, we're coming up on a little bit of time constraint. I know I let Howard and Emran and Gary and Chet know we were going to stop at around 7. It's about 10 after 7 right now Eastern. So I don't want to
Some
keep
people
that.
have to go shovel snow, right? So, and eat dinner.
That's right.
They do. So I want to say thank you right now to Howard for coming and joining us.
Thank you, Howard.
Emran and-
No
From
problem.
the
Thank you very much.
Howard listed some free resources, and I'll make sure I email it to everybody as well. So Howard, thank you. I know you're super, super busy, so it was great for you to spend some time with us in Detroit and really all over. And Emran and Gary, you guys didn't have to do this, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us in the Scrum Detroit meetup. And thank you for, and tell Rob, thanks for introducing us, and Liliana, thanks for helping out, and Chet for joining. Please, you guys, I have my email addresses. Reach out if you have questions. Thank you all for joining, and have a great night.
All
We'll
right.
have another meetup next month.
Stay
Thanks for
warm.
having us. I learned how to use Zoom.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It is funny that Howard has almost the exact amount of snow and the exact same temperature that it is here right now.
I think Howard has
Arkansas.
more snow than he
It's
than we have
below
in
the
Minnesota.